Dear boomers, have you ever had a near death experience? Mine is not exactly that I died and came back, but what it was is after the commune years, I gradually got my life back together and decided to move to Northern California, and I became a river rafting guide. This gentleman who ran the operation was a close friend of my family. My sister, her husband, and my sister's children were very, very close friends with his children. And his wife was a midwife slash nurse down at the birthing center down in the town, Happy Camp, California. It was like the last frontier of the wilderness in California. The What happened was his name is Bob, and Bob started this business, the river rafting business, in the summer, and he was a school teacher during the winter. A very interesting man. I came to like him very much because he treated me like an equal. He was my friend. We could talk about anything. It was very friendly, very friend oriented. So he asked me to be a river rafting guide on his trips. Now, the very first trip that we did, four elderly people, I would say in their late 70s, early 80s, came to do this river rafting trip. Now, there was some cause for concern. Uh, the rapids that were going through this Klamath River were rather, formidable. And these guys were ready to take it on. And, if you did the wrong thing, the wrong turn, then you would capsize. And, older people might have a greater chance of breaking a hip and blah, blah, blah. So we did it, and we were paid very close attention to them. At the beginning of the adventure, they were very, very, worried, maybe anxious. The vibrational field was sort of closed up. As we went through these rapids, they opened up, they became smiling and joyful. And I have a picture of the before and after of all of us. We were all kind of worried and anxious. And at the end of it all, we were like victorious. And it was beautiful. Their energy fields expanded far beyond their physical bodies. Anyway, that was very cool. And the next thing that happened was that another group, came up to do a river rafting trip from Los Angeles. Now, this group was completely different. They had a pilot brought them to Happy Camp. They had several children, at least five between the two couples, who were not well disciplined and didn't listen to a word or any point of direction we gave as we went through the rapids. They were willy nilly, and possessions were flying all over the place. They were crashing into rocks, and I think they came for an experience of life and death. And they did have a lot of fun. We did not. We were worried about this whole thing. It was like, okay, the first one was near perfect. The first trip was near perfect, and this one was near disaster. And so it was finally came to an end, and it was, exhausting. The first one, the first trip was exhilarating. So at the end of this trip, the pilot who had brought the family into Happy Camp was requesting that myself and Bob and the families, actually not the families, just Bob, his wife Liz, and the children and myself would go up into an airplane, and her airplane, the airplane that she brought to Happy Camp, and experience Northern California from another perspective. So I thought about this. It was not something I felt comfortable with. I didn't want to go. I'm not really that adventurous. And even then, that was I was in my mid 30s. I was not. Well, something else was telling me not to go. So the children were begging their father, "Please, let's not go. Okay, let's not go." And he was determined. He had a thing about obliterating, getting rid of fear, all fear, and he didn't seem to take into account that there are certain fears that help us avoid catastrophe. And so, to make a story a little shorter, they got up into the plane and they couldn't get out of the airport. They crashed into the canyons that surrounded the airport and they all died. They all died. It was like, oh my God, I almost got up on that plane and I love these people and they died. I would have died. But I was not as well connected to the fact that I was going to die right away until I realized, because I was so grief stricken about their death. My sister, that was her best friend, and her children were devastated by the death of their best friends, and there was just nothing anybody could do. And then I realized I needed to, I was spared for some reason, and I believe that from then on, it became an unconscious part of myself where I decided that I needed to find a pathway to contribute to the world in a way that was of service, that was full of love and gratitude. And I went to nursing school in Oregon after a few adventures beforehand, as you can imagine. The adventures beforehand, I went back to San Francisco to go to a school, the Roberto Azagioli School of Psychosynthesis, but it had just closed down. So I stayed a while. My friend Joel was there, and he lived in the Castro district, and he and I did a lot of gallivanting, and I was talked to him quite significantly and insightfully about my next path in life and his next path in life. And I loved him. He was the best man at my brother and Jala's wedding, and he was such an interesting person. His evolution from being a straight man to becoming gay, living in Castro district with all of this was in 1980, so you figure the bathhouses were taking off and people were getting into those situations, and they were all getting HIV, positivity, and it was an epidemic of death basically in San Francisco at that time. So I then went back to Oregon and went to nursing school, where I feel that I was meant to go to nursing school. I didn't like the punitive nature of nursing school, and I didn't really, as time goes on, like the punitive leadership styles of all the administrators in all the hospitals and everywhere I ever worked. There was a style that can be improved upon, and people need to elevate the standards of how to treat their nursing students and their nursing colleagues. And everybody says a bunch of women are together in these environments, but more and more men are coming in as nurses, and they alone have been responsible for the uptick in income of all the nurses. The nurses were not fighting for their income, but when the men came in, that changed the trajectory of income. So once I was in nursing school and became a nurse and came back to the East Coast, worked for Planned Parenthood, who sent me to the University of Pennsylvania to become a nurse practitioner. All these things were what I was meant to be and what I was meant to do. Every now and then I did write the story about my friend Bob and his family and the death of the children. And then within the last few years, I put a few finishing touches on the story, and Now I have to find it. Please subscribe to this channel. Um, I love you all. What is your story of near death? What happened to you that changed the way you looked at life? I mean, I had just come out of all those commune years of absolute unpredictability. But life is unpredictable, but not as unpredictable as that was. And then something happens in your life that changes everything. What was it for you? Thank you. Love you. Bye bye.